for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for calling this hearing on what I think is perhaps the most important constitutional question since I arrived on the Judiciary Committee in 2001. And that is this question of whether or not the federal government has the power under the Constitution of the United States to order Americans to purchase goods or services, whether they want them or need them or not. And I want to thank this panel, General Cuccinelli, who I greatly admire for his thoughtful testimony, Professor Dellinger and Professor Barnett. This has been an important discussion, and I expect it is. We've now added the Judiciary Committee to a chorus of kitchen tables around America, small tables in diners over coffee. This is an argument the American people are fully engaged in. And I think it's an enormously important debate. And the disposition of this debate, I think, will bear greatly on the liberties of our people for generations to come. Professor Dellinger held up the phone book and prepared, frighteningly, to begin to recite various goods and services that could never be compelled by the federal government. And while that list may be long, and I assume good faith by the witness, I fear that list of what would be included would be longer than any American today would ever imagine, meaning those things that could be regulated. I want to associate myself strongly with something that you said, General Cuccinelli. You quoted Professor Jonathan Turley, who said, if the states lose this case, it is the end of federalism. Let me say, I think the effort by states like yours, like my own beloved Indiana, 27 states in all, challenging this unprecedented exercise of federal power represents potentially the rebirth of federalism.
I hope so.
In America. And I leave that maybe for another hearing, Mr. Chairman, but I think something very special is happening in America today. And it's something that I believe our founders would have, as you said, General Cuccinelli, I think they would have greatly identified with the notion that states ought to, by definition, they should feel obligated to defend the liberties of the people and defend their own prerogatives as a means of ensuring the ongoing vitality of the limited government enshrined in the Constitution of the United States, and most especially defined in the 10th Amendment. I want to say specifically on this issue of regulating the market, and Professor Dellinger, I think you and I vigorously disagree on this, but I have great respect for your career and for your intellect. Let me just stipulate, you will never convince me that the Constitution of the United States gives this government the power to order Americans to buy health insurance. You'll never convince me of that. So I don't want you to spend a lot of energy. You don't even have to come over here.
No, he was good.
I was going to leave.
Let me just say, it's not going to happen. But it's important to me to understand your thinking on this. You actually said this fell in your judgment, this individual mandate in this legislation fell within I think you used the phrase, the routine power to regulate the insurance market. And I guess the question, this is a very sincere question. Sometimes we do more posturing here, but I'd love to know your answer to this question. And that is, how does regulating a market include compelling people to participate in that market? I mean, it just does seem to me that you make a point that the Commerce Clause contemplates an orderly regulation of the federal government of commerce between the states. But is it your view that the government, if the government has the power to regulate the insurance market in this country, that by definition that also includes the power to compel Americans to participate in that market.
That's Solicitor General Charles Freed's view from the Reagan administration, that purely and simply, just as the Supreme Court held in 1905, that prohibiting interstate commerce was a regulation of commerce, prohibiting the shipment of lottery tickets in that case. So you can either prohibit commerce or require commerce. Either way, you're setting the rule for commerce. I don't think you need to, and I don't think the Supreme Court would actually reach that question, because I think they would simply say regulating existing insurance contracts by forbidding pre-existing condition denials, for example, is clearly a regulation of commerce. And the only question is this, to use the Court's phrase, Justice Scalia's phrase, reasonably related to that regulation? And secondly, that this is a market in which Americans will already participate, cannot choose not to participate, and the facts show very substantially transfer the cost to other people. Now, let me acknowledge that when I say this is a routine application, I think you're right to raise a question about that. Let me acknowledge that in the following sense. While it's well within the commerce power, imposing affirmative obligations may very well demand a stronger level of justification. And I think what the Supreme Court would say is that there are three limits on Congress's power. First is political. That is, it's the only thing that prevents you from adopting a minimum wage of $5,000 an hour. I guess there's liberty. Secondly, there's Liberty Clause objections and Bill of Rights objections. And thirdly, I think where Congress is imposing affirmative obligations, you might need a special justification. You can't just simply say, making people buy something would help that company, it would help the economy, therefore they can willy-nilly buy something. As Randy Barnett said, a Supreme Court decision upholding this would talk a lot about the uniqueness of health care. It's the one market where federal law requires people to provide you with a service, whether you're going to pay for it or not, and transfer the cost to other people. And therefore, it's uniquely one where you could justify requiring people to maintain coverage.
The gentleman's time has expired, and the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Watt, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually wasn't intending to ask questions. I came back to thank my good friend, Mr.